it's really good to be short.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because nobody usually does.
Okay. Last month, we lived through the horror in Orlando, a mass shooting that left 49 people dead. Last week, we were stunned by a pair of videos that again revealed the clash of race and policing. And then Dallas, the brutal assassination of the police officers, supposedly an act of revenge, but taken out on a police department that seems to be a model for our country. It's not easy to come to grips with these events. They're a confusing tangle of race, of law enforcement, and the ready availability of guns that can so quickly take so many lives. But in the face of it all, Congress has been largely silent. We offer our condolences, we show our sorrow, but there's little, if any, action that follows. The shattering silence of this Congress when it comes to gun safety is a prime example. In Newton, 28 were killed, including 20 very young children. And what did the Congress do? Vote down every single gun safety bill that came before it. We even defeated a bill that would have required every purchaser of a gun to undergo a background check. The overwhelming majority of Americans support this, but it was defeated. And then after the Orlando shooting, we lowered our expectations. Surely, Congress could support keeping guns away from terrorists, particularly foreign nationals who can often legally buy firearms here today. The overwhelming number of Americans support such a measure, as does the Justice Department and law enforcement organizations. But Congress couldn't agree on that one small action. In the House, they refused to even hold a vote. Democrats were so frustrated, that led to a sit-in on the House floor, just to find a way to indicate their disbelief. Let me repeat that. Congress can't even agree that known or suspected terrorists, most of them from other countries, should be barred from legally buying guns in this country. Our hearts go out to the families of all of the victims and to those who are at ground zero of the seemingly intractable problem of race and policing. I plead with you to keep hope alive, keep searching for solutions, meet, talk, think, just as we've been calling on Republicans to do your job and hold hearings and a vote on Merrick Garland's Supreme Court nomination. We call on Republicans to stop stonewalling the nation on gun safety reform. Step away from the NRA, listen to your constituents, and let's take some action, and once and for all, before we see an even greater loss of life. And now, I would like to introduce you to a very fine neighbor senator from the great state of Washington, Patty Murray.
Thank you. There are already 3,600 reported cases of Zika in the United States and the territories. And the Puerto Rico Department of Health recently announced a 40% increase in the number of pregnant women with Zika over just 1 week. Those are numbers that should be extremely concerning to anyone who hears them. But unfortunately, when it comes to Zika, it is very clear Republicans simply are not listening. Not to Democrats, not to women and families, and not to public health experts. In fact, it unfortunately seems like on Zika, the Tea Party and Heritage Action are the only groups getting through to the Republicans at all. Because instead of working with us to send the bipartisan Senate Zika agreement, which had the support of all of the Democrats and nearly half of the Republicans, straight to the president's desk, Republicans chose to put their ideological battle against Planned Parenthood ahead of their responsibility as legislators to help fight Zika. They introduced a partisan bill that, among other concerns, uses a public health threat primarily impacting pregnant women, to pick a fight over Planned Parenthood and women's health. They jammed that partisan bill through Congress because they knew it would not go anywhere. And then they threw up their hands and said, sorry, we aren't doing anything more on Zika before we leave town for 7 weeks. Let me be very clear. The work is not over. They need to do their jobs and work with Democrats to pass an emergency funding bill that will protect women and families across our country. Every Zika infection prevented is a potential tragedy avoided for an expecting mother. We should be doing everything we can to protect families from this virus, and Republican ideological battles on women's health absolutely should not get in the way. So we are going to keep pushing Republicans to do their job on Zika, and we know that our colleagues stand with us. With that, let me introduce Senator Jeanne Shaheen.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Another place where our Republican colleagues have not gotten the job done is in the area of addressing the heroin and opioid epidemic. You know, in New Hampshire, our chief medical examiner has reported that so far this year there have been over 160 deaths from opioids in the state, and at this rate, it's projected that we will lose 500 lives in New Hampshire due to this epidemic. That's another big increase from last year. 108 of those deaths involved either fentanyl this year or a mix of fentanyl and some other drug. And for those of you who may not be familiar with fentanyl, it's a drug that's 50 times more powerful than heroin. Now, as a paper in New Hampshire put it last week, the surge in fentanyl use has taken New Hampshire into a scary new chapter in the opioid crisis. And if you're not seeing it in other states around the country, you will soon, sadly. These are lives cut short, more families devastated, more communities robbed, even deadlier drugs being dealt on our streets. And yet Congress still is not treating this epidemic like an emergency. That is just shameful. How many more people have to die before Congress takes this epidemic seriously? Now, yesterday we did make some progress. We passed the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. That's a small step forward. It's one I support. I co-sponsored that legislation. But there's not the funding in this bill that will really address this crisis. And so while we're hearing our Republican colleagues say, oh, there's money in the appropriations bill, don't worry, we passed CARA, we've done what we need to do to address this epidemic. Well, that's not what I'm hearing from law enforcement, that's not what I'm hearing from recovery and treatment experts, and it's not what I'm hearing from families who are still recovering and looking for help for their children. So we have more work to do. It's time for Congress to do its job, to treat this epidemic like the public health emergency that it is, to put a funding bill on the president's desk that will begin to stem the tide of this epidemic. New Hampshire and the country can't continue to wait while too many of the Republicans do the bidding of the far right. And now I'm pleased to introduce Cory Booker, Senator from New Jersey.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to stand here with my colleagues, but I'm frustrated that we are about to go into recess when there is so much work not done. I was a mayor of an inner city of a very poor community, and I watched teachers every day go to schools that were not as ostentatious as this building, but were crumbling. They didn't complain. They may not have felt right, but they did their job. I watched firefighters rushing into fires, never debating about philosophy or ideology. They were unified in purpose. They went in and they did their job. I watched cops or police officers. When guns were blaring, no situational awareness. They didn't ask whether the person they were trying to save was a Republican or a Democrat. They joined together and they did their job. And what frustrates me so much is just this morning we started this Senate session with a pledge. We swore an oath that we would be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the question is, why are there so many Americans that doubt those words right now? That look to this body with cynicism, because even on the things we agree on, 60, 70, 80% of Americans, we can't unify in this body to do our jobs. When lives are at stake with Zika, when people are dying because of lax gun safety, they're wondering why we can't do our job. Thousands of people are protesting in their streets right now. Thousands of them. Because they believe our justice system is broken. Well, you know what? The majority of the Senate thinks we need reform on the criminal justice system as well. Right and left, Patrick Leahy, Dick Durbin, partnering with Chuck Grassley and Mike Lee, recognizing the truth of what people who are protesting in the streets, blacks and whites standing up and saying, how can we have a justice system that's so unjust? Since 1980, we've seen our criminal justice system, we've seen our prisons explode on the federal level 800%, disproportionately incarcerating nonviolent offenders 80% poor, disproportionately minority. If you're black and poor in America, your chances of being arrested for a drug crime, even though there's no difference between blacks and whites for using drugs, you're almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for. And you wonder why people are protesting in the streets. Latino and black incarceration rates for nonviolent crimes, for doing things the last 2 presidents admitted to doing, are exploding. And yesterday on the floor, Mike Lee and Dick Durbin both showed examples of people getting life sentences or nearly life sentences for nonviolent drug offenses. And we have a solution to some of those problems, not everything, but we have a bill that's been worked on and supported by law enforcement agencies, people from the Koch brothers and Newt Gingrich, all the way to the ACLU. But we're about to leave for recess while a bill that's made it out of the Judiciary Committee that could begin to address the cynicism and skepticism and frustration and racial bias, that bill is going to sit and sit and sit because we didn't do our jobs. Now is the time that this country needs champions. It looks to this body to step up and say, we will make this nation more united. We will come together across party line. We will affirm our values. But now we are failing. And this is going to be a long, hot summer. People who aren't going to be able to take nice vacations. People who will be in our streets fearing for their children. People who are wondering why Congress has failed to live up to their oaths, to show the courage of teachers and firefighters and police officers, to set the standard for a nation in need. We should be doing our job. We should be staying here and doing the people's business. We should be affirming the best of our country. But sadly, the words of Langston Hughes ring so true right now for so many Americans. We need to remember, as he said, that there's a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all.
Okay, we'll take a few questions. Yes.
Donald Trump is expected to name his vice presidential running mate today with possibility of Mike Pence. What are your views about Mike Pence and respect to Vice
I have no comment on Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate. It's not going to help him that much no matter who he picks. Yes. Yes, here we have tried so hard. It was a compromise that we sent to the House. Now, a lot of us didn't really like that because we thought it was not enough. Centers for Disease Control, NIH thought it should be $1.9 billion. But we did what legislators are supposed to do. We compromised and agreed with that. In fact, it got every Democratic vote and most every Republican vote. 89 votes went to the House. Well, it came back with the, 2 million women last year went to Planned Parenthood. 2 million. Under the reasoning of the Republicans, I guess, they can call up their boutique doctor or go to an emergency room for their help. It doesn't work that way. 2 million women last year went to Planned Parenthood. The Republicans sending this thing back to us. The House Republicans sent it back. Senate Democrats thought it was crazy. Senate Republicans said, oh, that's okay. Planned Parenthood, we don't like them either, just like the Republicans in the House. They took a whack at clean water. They took $500 million from veterans to process claims. They took $543 million from Obamacare, 100 and some odd million from what we've been trying to do to stop this ravage of Ebola. And then just, I won't go through all of it, but just for good measure, they said, we want to reestablish the fact that we should be able to fly a Confederate flag in our cemeteries, military cemeteries. Well, we have tried. We can't accept that. So I've gone to McConnell personally. The White House called McConnell and Ryan and said, will you be willing to sit down and talk to Sean Donovan and the head of Sylvia Burwell, Labor HH? Yeah, no, we can't do that. We don't have time. And I've gone to McConnell on other issues that I thought would be good. We are willing to compromise. Last time I talked to him, he said, I'll run the traps on that. Well, I guess the traps didn't work so well. My staff reached out to his staff, no callback. So we've tried everything we can. I think they just think that, as they've said, that Planned Parenthood is something they have to do. Remember, the bill we sent to the House, if the House of Representatives, 435 of them were allowed to vote on this bill, it would pass overwhelmingly. Virtually every Democrat would vote for it in the House, and a number of Republicans would vote for it. But no, Ryan doesn't allow that.
Senator, you all are supposed to meet with Hillary Clinton today. What do you expect to talk to her about? Do you have any advice to her on picking a vice president?
Well, I kept waiting for her to call me. She hasn't done that yet.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
We know that she met with the House a couple of weeks ago. It was a very good visit. It wasn't like the one that Trump used where he was castigating members of his own party. We expect this to be something important. This was a big week for us. We watched the historic Bernie Sanders campaign. We watched the historic endorsement of his endorsement on Tuesday. This is going to be, for lack of a better word, a celebration. Celebration for a number of things. First of all, it seems appropriate to me, after 240 years, that we're going to have a woman be president of the United States. So we're going to have a good time with her today. One more question.
Senator, are you worried at all about the poll ratings? She's been sliding in the polls, and you're kind of pulling as her and Trump at 40-40, and some of the senators behind me know how I feel about polls. All you have to do is look at the polls of this week from Pennsylvania. We have McGinty ahead by huge numbers. One day we have Clinton ahead by huge numbers. The next day they've reversed it. We know that polls don't work anymore. I know that polls don't work. All you have to do is look at not only the United States, look at the world. We have in Great Britain, there was not a pollster in Great Britain that thought they would go out of the European community. That's the way it is. Polls are inaccurate. All I know is Nevada. I know that state quite well. And Hillary's going to win that state by a nice margin.
We're Senate, we're going to pick up 2 House seats. My seat will be filled with the Democrat. I feel good about what's going on in the country. And if anyone has any doubts, all you have to do is go back and look at what Donald Trump has said and done during the past year. Thanks, everybody.